What's going on, guys? It is your boy here, of course, the combat consultant, the soundboard god, Jacob Cooperman. We gotta talk about this Jake Paul and Mike Platinum Perry fight. My goodness, did Jake Paul improve in a lot of areas. I still think there's a little bit of room for him to improve, specifically in the footwork department, and we'll get into that. But what a fight, what a showing from Jake, and against a guy who I think is one of the biggest challenges Jake has faced yet. Now, to be fair, he's not a boxer, right? Jake has yet to fight a boxer who's his age, his weight, all that different type of stuff. And even I, a guy who's always been complimentary of Jake's path, getting into professional boxing, does have my questions of when he is going to face these guys that are professional boxers, that are at his weight class and are at his age. Because I think based off of what I saw in this performance, Jake can absolutely hang with low-level pros, if not up-and-coming talent. So let's get into it. First off, Jake looked absolutely massive in this. He almost dwarfed Mike Perry, and that's a tough thing to do. Mike Perry's a big, solid, strong guy, and it makes sense, right? Jake was using that weight advantage quite frequently over the course of the fight, but we have to keep in mind he was preparing for a much larger guy in Mike Tyson, a much scarier, a much harder hitter, right? And a heavyweight in his former days. So Jake was naturally going to be bigger for this fight, but dude, he just looked like a tank. It looked like the Jake Paul that started boxing all those years ago, ate Vine era Jake Paul, and then the two kind of just combined into the behemoth that we had in that ring. And that was another thing, man. With that came a big power advantage. He had Perry hurt over the course of the fight several times, I think 4 or 5 times. And I was surprised Perry, I think the third round, or maybe even the 5th round, where Perry just was wobbled and had trouble kind of clearing the cobwebs from his head and recovering, but he still kept coming. I was surprised that he didn't get dropped by Jake. But Jake showcased a lot of power, especially up a weight class. And I'm personally interested to see what he draws from this fight. Because while I do think it was a really good showing and a really good pick for an opponent, I think this fight would serve the best to kind of teach Jake some new aspects to his game, right? How to use weight, how to use his power, his physicality in there. There was also big improvements in this fight. For instance, his footwork, while sloppy at times, I noticed was better. He was not falling into shots like he usually does. He was setting things up nicely. He was using the jab. That was one of his best weapons, and the shot that he continuously was dropping Mike Perry with was a single or a double jab into an overhand. I remember Jake in the Tommy Fury fight, that overhand was extremely sloppy. Not in this fight. It was calculated. It was just a thing of beauty to see. It seemed like Perry really didn't have a way to get inside on Jake. I think he probably felt the power of Jake early. That plays a mental toll. And then also getting inside on a bigger guy that's constantly just waiting for you to come in, especially Jake with that lead hook. He was hitting Mike Perry quite frequently with that. If he's waiting for you to come in with his lead hook and he's catching you with it every time and he's popping the jab in your face, that's going to make it significantly harder for you, not only mentally to say, okay, I'm going to enter the line of fire, essentially, but then also mentally to say, once you take that step and say, okay, I am going to enter the line of fire, what do I do? Do I duck in? Do I, come out to the outside? Is he waiting there with a hook for me there? So there's a lot of mental calculations more than anything that I think he was making Mike Perry have to kind of account for. And again, I'm not playing the flute solo because I understand some of this was the size that Jake put on. I think if Jake was lighter, this might have been a different looking fight. I don't think that's unfair to say. Two things can be true at once. I think Jake looked great and I think he improved, but also we're talking about a different fight if the Jake that, let's just say, fought Tyron Woodley at that size, steps into the ring with Mike Perry. There were some points in the fight where I thought things got a little bit sloppy, especially late. Both guys are sweaty. The clinching was a little bit awkward, though I don't know if that was more Mike or Jake. Some of the shots Jake was throwing, you could see he kind of, when he gets tired, he reverts back to some of his past performances. But that's something in itself, knowing that when he was exhausted, he fell back to what was considered to be his best in his previous fights. So even though sometimes the footwork got a little bit awkward, sometimes the shots he threw weren't the best selection-wise, when he was fresh, almost instantaneously dropped Mike Perry. That was an off balance, but still, the shot selection there and the accuracy, when he was fresh, this was most certainly an evolution from Jake Paul that I do not think that we should overlook. I mean, Perry, to his credit, was pressuring. He had some great moments. I think his best work is done against the cage side, the ring side. That's where he can kind of catch you, and that's where he can keep you there with hooks, and he can kind of cut off the ring or the cage again, whatever you want to call it. But besides that, when it was an open space, Jake was just picking him off with that jab. And the fight just looked like it wore on Perry. It looked like it took a physical toll. I saw him in the later rounds going back to his corner. He looked exhausted. And Jake looked exhausted, but it's the type of exhausted where you go on a long run. Perry looked like the type of exhausted where you're getting backed up the entirety of a sparring session. You're getting hit with body shots. The guy's popping the jab in your face. You're frustrated because you can't get anything going. You're demoralized, essentially. That's what I saw in Mike Perry, and I don't think I've seen that yet. Usually he's a guy, and I'll say this, I was wrong in my prediction, to come forward and to really put it on guys. And when he can't do that, that says a lot about the fighter he goes in there with. Yeah, and I mean, a masterclass from Jake, if that wasn't enough, ends it off with a flurry of strikes after having Perry hurt for the 7th or 8th time consecutively that night. Man, it was a lot of fun watching Jake compete there, and I hope that he considers fighting actual boxers now. I think he can honestly hang with them, and if he can't, and I was talking to my buddy about this, if he can't hang with them, at least he could say that he tried. Because you can go up against Mike Perry, you can go up against Mike Tyson, you can go up against Tyron Woodley. All of these guys are threats. But what I would hate to see for Jake is that he goes into the ring time and time again with these guys that pose really real threats to him, and he's not getting the credit of going in there with a guy that probably would pose less of a threat, but was an actual boxer. See, I might get some heat from this, but I think Jake does way better against an amateur boxer. I think we've been shown enough to know that he has gifts. He's improving in his game every time he steps out there. I want to see him face a low-level pro. I think I said amateur. I think it's time. I think we need to see him tested in a different way. And that's what I'm saying. It's kind of like two things can be true. Again, as I said at the beginning of the video, Jake can test himself against guys who aren't boxers, and he can test himself against a boxer who's not necessarily going to bring the power that I don't know, a Tyron Woodley or a Mike Perry is. Guys that'll challenge him in different ways and give him a more legitimate look in the sport, which is what I think Jake wants, though I can't be certain. I don't know the guy, and I don't claim to know what his modus operandi is. But do let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below about the win. Was this Jake's best performance yet? Where do you guys think he goes from here? And where do you guys think Mike Perry goes from here? Let me know down there in the comments. Without further ado, that has been the video for this week. Thank you so much for watching. It has been your boy, the combat consultant, the soundboard god, Jacob Cooperman. I'll see you in the next one. Deuces.